Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and this is another episode of Graveyard Shift. I'm going to try to talk about a few topics for tonight, and then be on my merry way. So, in terms of today, there was a special lecture that was going on at the Harvard Club during lunchtime. And there's this ex-CIA guy. His name is Rolf Mowat Larson. He's an ex-military guy and ex-agency guy. He went to West Point, you know, and eventually started working for the CIA and all this. So he had a kind of an interesting take as he was being interviewed about what was going on with Russia and this whole pseudo coup and the Wagner group and all this. So I'll kind of bring that up, and then I'll also kind of bring up a little bit about what's been going on with my father. He has, for the ones that don't know, he has ischemic dementia, so I did a Zoom call with him with my brother, and it's kind of sad. I could just kind of see the deterioration of your parent. But let's start with Rolf. He's about ready to retire now. He's also been teaching as he left the agency. You know, so I think it was he was teaching at foreign policy. I think it's foreign policy school. Maybe it's over at the Kennedy Center. But I'm not sure about that. But it looks like he's winding down his career. But he was asked a bunch of questions. There were I want to say about maybe, I don't know, 100 and some people that were on the call. But you know, he had some interesting perspectives. So let's talk about that. You know, what did Rolf say about, you know, being an ex-CIA guy, what his perspectives were on Putin and Prigozhin. So he said that Wagner went up on his radar back during the Syria days, all right, where he was kind of studying him. And something that was interesting I didn't know about, maybe the people that will be listening to this did know about this, but back during the Syrian days, the Wagner group, probably they're still there, they were near a position that was by U.S. Special Forces. So our Special Forces actually has attacked Wagner in Syria. I didn't know that. I mean, I thought that was kind of like an interesting little tidbit. And our Defense Department actually stated to Putin that this was not an attack against his regime. It was to just protect the position that his mercenaries, these Wagner guys, were advancing in. So, you know, our special forces had to hit Wagner in Syria. Now, what year this was, I don't know. This probably was like around 2015, 2016, I don't know. But I just thought that was interesting. He also said that in the United States, once we went into the Middle East, that there has been a lot of discussion with Obama, with Trump, and even with Biden on using Blackwater as kind of like a mercenary force where there's plausible deniability, very similar to what Russia's doing with Wagner. Wagner is not really part of the Russian military. It's kind of like Blackwater. But with Blackwater, it's usually it's ex-military, special forces kind of guys, right? Wagner is, it could be ex-military, but a lot of them are just convicts that, ended up, trying to get a second chance, right? So they're a little bit more meaner. Wagner is kind of almost similar to like the Knights Templar. If you look at the early history of the Knights Templar, they were really criminals that they were given a second chance to fight, in the Crusades. So it's interesting to another data point that Ralph brings up, with his, perspective as being an ex-CIA guy and, his involvement in Europe, when he was CIA, and how Russia, Putin's Russia is leaning on these kind of Blackwater kind of mercenary setup, with Wagner. So what's happening is that there's an internal struggle within Russia. That internal struggle is between the Wagner command, right, and its forces, and the actual military brass, right, that are executing the war in Ukraine. All right, so there's kind of like this internal fighting, and then the other point here is Putin. Hopefully, there's not too much wind while I'm recording this. I apologize. It's a little windy today. But Putin is also concerned about his military brass that's executing the war, that they get too powerful and might overthrow him. So there's an internal struggle independent of what's going on with Wagner. Now, then we know that the military from, the main military in Russia was not sending materiel that it was needed to Wagner. And this is why Prigozhin was so upset. So there's enough internal struggle that's going on that we don't really know if there was really a coup or kind of like there's a dynamic that's going on in Russia that there might be 2 or 3 types of people or individuals that may be trying to position themselves and overthrow Putin. And Putin is really not sure who he can trust. So he kind of doesn't allow for Wagner to be too powerful, but he's also not really wanting his generals to be too powerful. It's, even though he wants the war in Ukraine to kind of end for Russian victory, it seems as though he's more concerned about his own back because he doesn't know who to trust. So Rolf was kind of like bringing up that, you know what, it's Putin, even though it sounds so crazy, may keep Prigozhin alive because of Prigozhin. The way the Russians kind of think things out is that what Prigozhin did by going to Moscow, or almost going to Moscow, right, and being so belligerent, was kind of manly and very Russian-esque, right? So they're gonna view him. The population is gonna view Wagner, the Wagner group, and Prigozhin specifically, as kind of a hero, even though he didn't go full out with the raid into Moscow. All right, so he has a lot of capital within the population, kind of like this hero-esque kind of Russian manhood kind of thing that's going on. So it may backfire if Putin kills him. So Prigozhin is actually stronger now because of what he did. At least it, as political capital in the eyes of the Russian people. This is the assessment from the CIA, the ex-CIA guy, so Rolf. So then in the news today, and Rolf didn't bring this up, but there's a general. I don't know his Russian name, but he's called General Armageddon. Supposedly he's been detained. So, Putin is kind of trying to sweep up and find out who was supposedly in cahoots with Prigozhin to try to, hopefully I can get past this music here. So, Prigozhin, had some help. And it's possible that this General Armageddon was, one of these allies for Prigozhin, and then Putin is going to start sweeping. Now, even though Putin doesn't know who to trust, either Prigozhin, his generals, or other people, he does hold a grudge, and that Prigozhin's life probably is on the chopping block, but not quite yet, because I think Putin is being methodical and trying to figure out where are the moles, using this incident to figure out who can he trust and who can he not trust. It does seem as though the generals are incompetent and not willing to execute the war. Now, this is another point that Ralph brings up that I think is actually pretty good. And that is, when you go into war, you don't really have your general. Meaning the general you need for that war to be executed properly, usually, you have to fire many generals to find the right general to be able to get the job done. He used the analogy, it takes the situation to find the Patton, General Patton, or the General Grant for the American Civil War. So, usually when these wars happen, they aren't executed properly with the original generals, and they usually get fired, and new generals come on board, and then try to get the job done if they win the war, right? So Putin still hasn't found his footing on that, and it doesn't seem as though he's willing to fire his generals. So it just seems, and the bigger question is why? Why is that he's not willing to fire his generals, similar to what Lincoln did during the Civil War, right? He fired lots of generals that weren't, doing what he wanted them to do, and eventually, found generals that were willing to take the Civil War to the extreme to get it to end. So Putin feels Putin seems as though he's running scared because he doesn't know who he can trust. And we may actually see that in this year, the actual fall of his regime. Or his health. I don't think his health is very good, so you might see the decline of his health. But Prigozhin, he, even though he's still alive, he may be still alive for only a couple reasons. If he was executed, it may tip the scale and people would go against Putin, even though some of the media, or a lot of the media, is spinning it. This was Prigozhin. This was a coup attempt against Putin. There's also individuals within the Russian military that it looks like they're trying to make their move against Putin. They just haven't found their opportunity. And I think that if you look at Russian leaders, it's a common theme, especially like Stalin. They just don't trust anybody, and they start killing everybody. I think something similar is happening with Putin. He's in the zone now where he doesn't trust anybody, and he's going to start losing the people's confidence in Putin, and it'll start to unravel. And so the execution of the war within Ukraine is probably going to be just retreat for the Russians, and the Ukrainians will win eventually. Now, what Ralph did mention was that, and of course you got to remember he's coming from the military, ex-military guy, ex-CIA guy. So, he really focused on the idea that we need to continue the fight and the execution of this for the final conclusion of having Ukraine win the war, from the U.S. perspective. But I keep on coming back to the thought that when we saw the Berlin Wall fell, the United States, even though China was not on really the radar, the United States, in a unipolar world, that launched us into the Middle East. When we have Russia off of the chessboard and we truly pivot to Asia and start conflict with China, there's going to be less constraint by the U.S. military because Russia will be off the chessboard, assuming that Putin gets overthrown and Ukraine is a lost war for Russia. So sorry about that. So, so Ralph, this ex-CIA guy, he was just basically saying, the agencies definitely want you know, to continue this war and get Russia to lose. They're concerned about this instability that's taking place. Who are the moles within the Russian military that Putin can't trust? And that's there, you know, he's starting to try to find them. And it looks like it's starting with this General Armageddon, whatever his name is in Russian. I don't know what his real name is, but General Armageddon seems to be part of the coup. But Ralph did think that Prigozhin probably would be assassinated because Putin, you know, holds grudges and, you know, is going to probably take him out. But it's not going to be right away, because Putin, even though it seems like it's chaotic right now in Russia, he's actually being methodical, according to this Rolf. Putin's being methodical, trying to find out who he can trust and who he can't trust. But I think Putin's a lot weaker than we thought. I think the Russian military is a lot weaker than we thought. I'm willing to bet that even the Chinese military is weaker than we think. Or at least, it just seems like we look at this whole arc going all the way back to probably all the way back to the 50s, 1950s. Seems to have been a miscalculation by our intelligence agencies and how powerful our enemies are or were. And, the reality is they're probably a lot weaker. Because if you say that they're weak, then you don't need as much arm money, arms development and military procurement. So, to keep that money flowing, you always pump up your adversary. So that's, another component to this. But I thought it was interesting that Ralph, basically, said that Russia is moving into this era of mercenary conflict, and that the United States was trying, the military brass actually, was trying to move in that kind of direction during the Obama administration, the Biden administration, even Trump administration. But each of those presidents decided to have limited conflict using Blackwater. Now, what Ralph's saying is basically it was, you have to limit their use because it can get out of hand in terms of, atrocities. There may be a miscalculation on the battlefield when you're using these mercenaries like Blackwater, and it may cause a political or international problem. But I think it's kind of scary when you have the military, even when we're talking about the Pentagon or even the Russian version of it, leaning on these mercenary groups like Wagner or Blackwater. I think we have two. We're shifting risk off the balance sheet, for the in financial kind of analogy here. We're shifting the risk to someone else, not realizing that it keeps on building systemic risks for everybody. So, perfect example is Lehman, right? Shift the balance sheet risk of these bad mortgages into these mortgage-backed securities that are rated AAA or whatever, but yet what's packaged in them has quite a few non-performing loans, and you do enough of that and it creates a systemic risk, and then we have Lehman, right? Well, something similar is happening with these Blackwater and Wagner mercenary types, and it can cause a systemic risk. So according to Rolf, the ex-CIA guy, right, he was, stating today that, during the call that I was on, that he, there was this kind of push. There was this push over the years within the different administrations, a push from the Pentagon to use these, use these foes, maybe even pushed by the agencies probably too, because, you do these kind of black operation type stuff with the CIA. So, and I'm sure JSOC's tied to all that, but from a philosophical point of view, if you're going to execute a war, it should be from the military of that country, not paying mercenaries to do the job, so you can have plausible deniability, or you lose the ethics of the war, if there is such a thing. I mean, that sounds kind of an oxymoron, but there's ethics. There's a certain code of conduct of humans, even in a war, that should be part of the calculation. But when you outsource it to a third party, that third party doesn't want the war to end. They want it to continue, so they keep on getting the cash flow. It's very similar to hiring a consultant like from McKinsey, right? And, do they really want to solve your business problem quickly? Of course not, because they want to keep on charging you. Fix the problem. Are you happy? And just maintain that relationship, to keep that cash flow going. So, you have to execute the war just good enough to keep the cash flow flowing. And I think this was exactly what was going on in Vietnam. And I think that was exactly what was going on with Iraq and Afghanistan. Execute it just good enough to keep it going. And so there's an ethical issue when you're using these kind of mercenary groups. And do we need so many special forces? I mean, my brother was in my family, we've had many people throughout the generations serving in the U.S. military, mostly in Navy and Army, but some Air Force. I don't think we've had any Marines. But, do you really need so many of these, super troopers? And after they have done their tours or, retire, what are they really going to do? Open up a gym like Jocko did? I think we're putting too much emphasis on this special forces, commando kind of thing. It's like a Sony PlayStation now. But so that's the take that Ralph had with Prigozhin, that he's going to be around for a little bit. Putin's probably going to take him out, but not until after he roots out all the potential generals that were tied to this pseudo coup. But there's this dynamic. Putin may still need Prigozhin because because of what he did, was very Russian. He was stating that he didn't get his material that he needed on the battlefield because of incompetence from the generals, and that he was going to execute judgment because of that. That's very Russian. And so that machoism, it gives him some street cred. So taking out Prigozhin, there's going to be a negative backlash on Putin, even though he potentially cannot trust him. Can he trust Prigozhin more, though, than some of his other generals? And I think that question, the answer is probably yes. So, so that's, that's that. It was interesting. It was an hour conversation with Rolf on Zoom. And, there were about 100 and some people that were on there. And he gave his take as being an ex-CIA guy, what he thought. And so it was interesting to have that kind of perspective, especially since, he served in the military. He was a West Point grad, ex-CIA guy. And, was part of that European theater. So, and my biggest takeaway from it wasn't his perspective on Prigozhin so much. It was how we were used in Blackwater so heavily in the Middle East. And they wanted to ramp it up even further, something more similar to Wagner. Instead of it being, Blackwater is more like special force kind of stuff, small operations, tactical kind of thing. But Wagner is more mechanized, and it looks like the Pentagon wanted to turn Blackwater into a mechanized unit, which I think is dangerous. So that was my big takeaway from it. And, just today, this General Armageddon gets detained. Who knows what's going to happen? He's probably going to get executed from it. But it does look like a failed coup attempt. Something was happening behind the scenes, and Prigozhin didn't get all the resources that he thought he was going to get. I think this is what happens to these failed coup attempts. A lot of people are unhappy about, that particular regime or whatever. But then when push comes to shove, no one really, does what they said they were going to do, and that's why they fail. Prigozhin probably would have succeeded in it if he had the more backing from the military, which I think he thought he would have. Now, the other topic that I wanted to talk about was, this weekend, my brother saw my father in the nursing home. He has ischemic dementia. He was diagnosed with it back when I was doing my TAT protein research, laboratory research, back in 2021. And, he eventually had to go into the nursing home. He can't talk. He doesn't read anything now. He can watch TV, and what's interesting is that, he can listen to music. Once in a while, it seems like he does recognize us. It looks like he's trying to process something in his head, but just can't get it out. His facial features are, okay, but, he doesn't have any like palsy kind of situation. At first, we thought he had a stroke. He was starting to have decline probably around 2018, I think was when it really started. We thought because of his age that was probably the beginnings of Alzheimer's, but what it ended up being was ischemic dementia, which is much more rapid than Alzheimer's. But because of COVID and everything, he stayed indoors and he didn't move around, and because of that, probably accelerated the problem. He probably should have seen a doctor before, it progressed as far as it did. But my brother went and saw him, and we did a Zoom call,
And I saw my father. I'm kind of depressed about it though, because you know he's 80 now, or turning 80, and he's turning 80, I think, yeah, he's turning 80 in this year. And then you know it's just depressing to see you know that the father that you remember isn't really there anymore. And but what was interesting is that when my brother started playing the music, my father used to really be a connoisseur for classical music, especially Mozart. But he, you know, listened to he was into Copland too. So the Copland's work is a little bit louder. While Mozart's is, you know, is kind of a softer in comparison. So because of his hearing or because of his cognition, his cognitive functions, it seems as though he's more responding to Copland than to Mozart, which surprised me actually, because you know he was such an avid Mozart fan. But when he was asked if he liked the music, he did shake his head yes. So he is like, he can respond sometimes, but it's like a child before they learn to talk. You know, so my father's kind of mean reverting back to childhood. You know, and of course, you know, the nurses have to take care of him, and you know, at the nursing home. But there's so many different avenues of conversation on this. You know, a lot of people don't realize and how precious life is. You know, the difference between where I'm at right now and where my father is in terms of age is only 30 years, right? And, you know, 30 years is like a flash, you know, it goes by so quick. But yet, you know, it's distant too. So not only seeing my father kind of withering away in the nursing home, and I wish we could, you know, do more for him, but you know, we just can't. Yeah. There's also this creeping death that in our own lives, you know, and my brother, he's younger, but you know, he's not as healthy. You know, he has heart disease and diabetes and needs to watch his weight and all this. And, you know, he looks like he's accelerated in his age. And I was watching my father and my brother, and I'm like, you know, sometimes I could see my father in my brother. You know, and I don't, you know, I just, so the time that my brother has to reaching where my father is probably less, even though he's younger than me. You know, his biological age is far more advanced versus his chronological age. So, you know, seeing that dynamic also is the, you know, this time ticking situation for my brother is, you know, and he has, you know, family and everything, and he, you know, how do they survive through something like that if something major happened to my brother? Which, I mean, it has to, you know, my other brother who died from heart disease in 2010, which was his twin. So, you know, he already has the predisposition for heart disease. But yeah, it's so hard to kind of see. So when you're looking at that situation with your parents or with, you know, siblings or whatever, and we start talking about, you know, what's going on in Ukraine or Russia and Prigozhin and Wagner and the coup and Putin, it puts in perspective, like what's really important, and we've wasted a lot of our lives, I know this sounds kind of philosophical, but we have wasted, most people have wasted their life. They spent it watching MSNBC News or, CNN, or playing around on Twitter too much, or, this modern society we have has wasted so much of our time. And I think the research is also showing that it's made us dumber. Made us, even though it supposedly made us more connected, we're probably less connected socially. I have so much time. And again, the only difference between myself and my father in terms of age is you're talking a 30-year difference. How much TV watching is that? How much social media browsing is that? How much of wasted time of our lives does the average person do in 30 years? It's a lot. And it's going to be sleeping. You sleep 1/3 of it, right? So around 10 years of it is sleeping. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the person. You only have 20 years left, right? And then in a normal 30-year working, another 1/3 of it is working, right? So you only have 10 years really to use for yourself. You spend so much time. Wasted time. I was telling my brother after we did the Zoom call, because my brother was with my father, and then he called me on not Zoom, FaceTime. But after that was all done, I told my brother that I can hear this train, and that train is in the distance, but it's getting louder, as it's blowing its horn. And when it comes to that intersection, you hear that horn blaring, really loud. That's when death happens. And then in the distance, as it's passing by the intersection, it gets softer and softer and softer. I mean, that's really life. Life is this freight train, and it's very faint as you're going through life, and then as you get closer and closer to average life expectancy, it gets very loud, and eventually it's loudest, and then you will expire, and then once you expire, then the train just gets softer and softer as it passes by, only for it to be another loud increase for someone else. Their arc. So it's like I sense like there's a freight train. It's getting louder. It's not too loud, but it's getting louder over time. And I sense mortality. Definitely sense mortality. And a little bit worried and concerned for my father. There's nothing that we can do about it. I mean, he's being cared for. But it's not easy to see. It's not easy to see a parent or a sibling or a family member go through this, this end stage of their life. And every time I see him, my father, every time I see him, it's just like it kind of chips away at what I remember him to be. Like when my brother died in 2010, it's because he died at 36, it's very fresh in my mind, like what he looks like, and he kind of is forever young. Even though 36 is not too young, but I mean, it's for dying, it's too young. But I mean, the point I'm making is that he's permanently fixed in terms of what he looks. But as you're seeing your parent get older and start to worsen in terms of health, those memories that stick in your mind and are fresher than what you remember them to be. And that's another dynamic that's hard to kind of like, obviously you have to visit your parents and you have to see them and, be engaged when they're, engage your parents when they're in, the nursing home and stuff. But it's not easy, especially when they're non-responsive, because you don't really have anything to say. There's, how many times can you say, how you doing? You can't have a real conversation. It's not easy. It's very hard emotionally, and it's, there's many different dynamics to it. So that was another thing. And then something that's somewhat funny, but I don't know, comical or whatever. But then my dog yesterday gets stung by a bee. So it started whining with its, it looked like it stepped on a bee or something and got stung on the paw. So the dog was whining for about 6 hours or so from the sting, but she's all right now. But yeah, I think when it comes to parents or family members aging, you really don't really fully appreciate or understand what that means until you get to a situation where they have a stroke or they're in terminal care or and how that whole industry of the nursing homes and hospice care and all that whole dynamic, a lot of people don't know about it. I don't know how that how that's funded and how that's what's the treatment for the patient, and, the long-term care and the spiral downward in their health. There's a lot there, and a lot of people don't know about it, and it wears on the rest of the family seeing it happen. Yeah. There was one other thing that I wanted to bring up. So I brought up the Russian thing, and I brought up my father and the dog. What was the other thing I was going to bring up? Oh, so supposedly this is another reason why I wanted to get out and walk around tonight and do a recording. Supposedly there's going to be a dust storm again hitting New York. I'm not sure what day it's supposed to hit. Now, my understanding is it's already hit Chicago and parts of Michigan. So, I'm not sure if it's the blowover effect or if it's coming north. It's pushing north. from Quebec into New York. So I'm not sure if we're going to see this tomorrow or not. Right now, I don't smell any of the wildfire. I don't see right now any dust in the air like it was, a couple weeks back, how bad that was. I mean, it was really bad on that peak day. So right now it's a nice breeze, and we don't have any real problems with pollution at this moment. But that might be, in a couple more days, maybe even tomorrow, who knows? But in a couple days, it might get bad enough where I just stay indoors. Because once it hits to about, you start smelling it, you start tasting it. Around when it hits about 90 or 100, that's when it kind of starts. And then whatever units they use. But then once it gets to like 120 or 240, that's really bad. So, but right now it's fine. It's nice and peaceful. But, so we'll see. I'll do a report about that, of what my observations are. But it probably will just blow back over. The really bad day that we had 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, lasted 2-3 days. It comes in, it was mild in that first day, and then, it really ramped up to that apocalyptic look. It looks like Blade Runner kind of look. But, yeah, that's scary, I guess. You don't want to breathe that stuff in and cause more pulmonary problems, since we already went through a whole pulmonary problem with Fauci. But I don't know, that was my take. So we had, a ad hoc Zoom meeting with an ex-CIA guy that's done about 5 lectures over at the Harvard Club. So he's kind of a regular. I believe he said that he taught, he was adjunct professor at, I think it was the Kennedy School. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to see, as I kind of took time off from my studies to listen to what he had to say about the Wagner. And he doesn't even say Wagner. He uses Wagner. He pronounces it Wagner, which is really the English way to say it. Wagner, right? It's the German way. But that's my update for this episode. So please subscribe to my channel, or channels. I have 3 YouTube channels. And when I post a video, you just click on the video, and in the description of that video will be the links to all of my channels. And the Brighteon, the Bitchute, the Rumble. So please subscribe to all of them. The way the censorship is on YouTube, it's because of what I have been covering about, the crisis. They shadow ban and they bleed the subscribers. So whenever I do a post, I actually get a knockdown of about 4 to 10 subscribers at a time. So, so if you haven't subscribed, or you've been unsubscribed by their little games that they play, please subscribe to those YouTube channels. Again, all the links are in the description of any video I post on Twitter. So, and then if you could, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That is the-studio-reykjavik.com. And you can purchase the different supplements that I offer. So, I've been really focused on kind of anti-aging health protocol, right? I've been doing this for a long time. A big reason is because there were so many deaths that happened in my family, aunts, uncles, right? My brother, right? My mother, had multiple heart attacks starting at age 40. So heart disease runs in the family. So once I turned 16, I was very, very diligent on, exercise and proper nutrition and supplementation. So I was really doing as much as I could with the antioxidants back in the 80s, right? But as time has gone on, through the 90s and 2000s and, fast forward to the 2020s, right? The type of supplementation, the purity and the knowledge of how to use this stuff is so much better than what we had in the 80s. So, over time, I've changed what I do for supplementation. So, my store is basically focused on, this kind of an anti-aging protocol. And the whole idea is that if you follow this, you're adding to the probability that you're going to have more years and healthier years. So you'll have more vibrance instead of, the normal American lifestyle. You look around, America is just, the United States today is nowhere near what it used to be. Like, you go back to pictures like World War II, let's say 1940s, 1950s, the physique of people were totally different. Now, because of all the fast food and the GMO stuff and everything, that everyone's a lot of people are super unhealthy. And, there's a way to get out of that. That's proper exercise, it's proper diet, right? Listen to, podcasts or, conversations like this, and take a walk and, get the body moving. That's a big part. Slow down some of the aging problems that people have. Just move, just walk. If the average person walked like 6 miles a day, there would be huge benefits to your health. You add in proper diet, right? And then, that adds to another set of benefits. And then you add in supplementation. And so what should someone do if they don't know what to do? And the whole protocol idea that I have is this: you neutralize pathogens, because if you don't get sick because of a pathogen, then your body isn't using up its energy to fight it. And usually when people are sick, it begets other sicknesses, other coughs and colds and stuff, right? So when you get a cold, for example, just the average day cold, right? If you get a cold, you're fighting it for a week. And then your body, you may feel a little bit better that second week. You don't really fully get to baseline until that third or fourth week. So your body's healing. But if you have these kinds of situations happening to you, 4 times a year, right? 4 times 4 is 16 weeks. 16 weeks out of the year, you're either sick or recovering from sickness. So if you can reduce this type of inflammation on a regular basis, your body will actually heal. So the whole point here is that if you neutralize pathogens, you reduce the oxidative stress on the cell, and
you bring down that inflammatory response and control your blood glucose levels, you're going to go very far in, with anti-aging. So the nanosilvers, they're great for neutralizing pathogens. So, that means, liquids, taking a teaspoon of, nano liquid, nanosilver liquid every day. You just kind of gargle it in your throat and, swish it in your mouth for about 60 seconds and then just swallow it. And you're, that's a great way to kind of reduce the chances of having these kind of chronic kind of pathogens getting in. It's, most pathogens, not all, but most pathogens are coming from, upper respiratory path, right? Another great product to, for anti-aging is C60. C60 is great to reduce reactive oxygen species. It's a very strong antioxidant. When you do that, you're strengthening your mitochondria. Your mitochondria will get healthier. You'll have more ATP. You'll have more energy. When you have more energy, your synapses in your brain starts to fire faster. When you have more synapses firing, you'll end up having more dendritic connections. So you won't have it's called reset. It's called depression actually, but the receding of the dendrites is a depressive situation because it's not communicating with adjacent cells. So in neurology, it's that plasticity that I'm talking about. When it's receding, it's called depression. But obviously, there's psychological depression too, which is a different topic. But there's, when you have more energy, you're going to have more muscle mass. You're going to be moving around more. You're going to lose weight faster. When you have ATP, you're going to have processes in your body function better, right? One of the biggest things that happens when you get older is your ATP goes down because you don't have proper mitochondrial health, and it spirals down. There's a buildup of oxidative stress. So you take the C60 to neutralize that oxidative stress, and you end up improving your mitochondrial health. Then, okay, so that's the strong antioxidant. What's some of the other things for the anti-aging protocol? Just to start with, resveratrol gets rid of senescent cells. It's also an antioxidant, but it's not as strong of an antioxidant as C60, but it's synergistic with C60. So, taking resveratrol to get rid of the senescent cells, because when your cells start to divide, they'll get to a point where they can't divide anymore, and they kind of just stop. They just stay there, and there's a buildup. These cells over time in your tissue will start to build up, and that's the average age of the tissue is predicated on how long are your telomeres. Well, if you have short telomeres in most of your cells, that tissue is very old. But if you get rid of some of the senescent cells and the adult stem cells in that tissue start to proliferate, then the average length of the telomeres are actually longer. So the tissue actually is younger. So, that's an important feature to take a look at. And then control blood glucose levels with ashwagandha. Everyone knows that if you're hyperglycemic, that puts a lot of stress on the vascular system, right? And that's that inflammatory response leads to other problems like cardiovascular disease. So you want to control that with the ashwagandha. controls your blood glucose levels. And then you bring down that inflammation in your body so your body can heal. You bring down that inflammation with the turmeric supplements. So those things I just mentioned, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, the C60, the resveratrol, the nanosilver, that right there, the nanosilver liquid, that right there is a very strong package to start an anti-aging protocol for you. And you would see benefits in a very short amount of time, and you see compounded benefits if you repeat it over, over many months or many years. There's a compound effect as your body's healing when you're not chronically sick. And then you can, get a little bit more advanced, like taking Clarity Factor for more mental clarity and get those neurons firing more. So it keeps the brain active, and getting proper night sleep with the good night formula, with the melatonin and the tryptophan. And, the probiotics are really important in terms of getting your gut biome to be in its proper homeostasis, because that's a lot of the metabolism is happening with that. There's a communication between your gut and your brain, and your gut and your liver. But if it's not working properly and you're not absorbing properly, then you start to have problems. So, as we get older, our pancreas doesn't secrete enzymes like it used to. So you need like the amylases and the lipases, the proteases. Those things are important to break down, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, right? So if your pancreas isn't working right and you don't have, a really good gut biome, you're not gonna be able to digest properly. And so that's going to kind of hold you back. So there's a digestive enzyme supplement that I have that kind of helps with getting you back to, that proper breakdown of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So, you can kind of look at this holistically. But there's not one thing that's like the one thing that's going to reverse aging, right? It's a holistic approach. And then you get a little bit more advanced. You take NMN, which I don't sell, but NMN is a very good supplement to improve sirtuins that also helps with the mitochondria. So it's synergistic with C60 and resveratrol. And then K2, MK7, which I don't sell, that is great for reducing cardiovascular disease. And that is synergistic with the D3 and the ashwagandha, because that's reducing that inflammatory response and building up those foams, reducing the foam cells that end up being plaques. So foam cells are created, plaques are created by oxidized LDL getting eaten up by macrophages. So if you're reducing that situation in your blood vessels, then you're reducing your chances of getting plaques. So, if you just listen to me, a lot of things, you follow the protocol, you'd be amazed and how much benefit this has to your existence, really. But a lot of people don't pay attention. This is something that I've learned in learning medicine, as I progress in my medical studies and career. There's a lot of people out there that know what they need to do, but they don't want to do it. It's the comfort food.
fast is easy. You know, taking a 6-mile walk every day is not so conducive to their lifestyle, so they would prefer to stuff themselves with a Big Mac and fries and, you know, a Big Gulp from 7-Eleven. But the reality is that a lot of the diseases that we're starting to see at a younger age, cardiovascular diseases, the diabetes, even, you know, pulmonary function, they would all improve if people just started taking a little bit more care of their diet, improve their exercise, and, you know, do the proper supplementation. So, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take a look at the products that I offer. Use the discount. Use the discount code. That code is all caps, and it's discount 5. So all caps, discount 5, and it will be $5 off, and that will help with the shipping. So, a lot of people like go, why is the shipping so expensive? I do a flat rate depending on the size. There's like 3 different sizes that I do for flat rate, and in terms of how fast you need it. But I exclusively use FedEx. The reason being is that they kind of guarantee the delivery very quickly. So usually when you purchase something, you get it within 2 days, 2 to 3 days. So, and it's, it's just, FedEx is just so much better to work with compared to UPS or even USPS, because, they either lose the package or, they're late or whatever. But the quality of the shipping is so much better with FedEx. So I exclusively use FedEx. But use the discount code 5, and that will reduce the shipping cost by $5. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you guys listening to my rambles as I work through my thoughts, and please stay safe and have a good night.